Okay, thank you for tuning in to this Tuesday, December 15th. Organic News on Awake Radio, and apologies for the late start, but I don't know what happened to my first guest, Oliver Tickell, who was supposed to be on. Things happen, people get so busy, maybe he just it slipped his mind. So I was actually going to just read the discussion that we were going to talk about. Oliver Tickell writes for The Ecologist, and his last piece about the Carlisle floods, seeing as though they just had the COP21 in Paris, which people are calling just fraud. I mean, people were protesting that it's just more corporations just trying to find more ways of, greenwashing their image for profit and capitalize on climate change. And so Oliver had an article on the Carlisle floods in this low-lying part of the UK. It says, bring back the trees and the beavers. The key to reducing the risk of more floods like those in Carlisle is to realize that conventional flood defense can never provide security against the ever more extreme weather events that global warming will bring. We must embrace natural solutions to holding back floodwaters. More trees and bring back the beavers. In a quote, it reads, it's time for governments to move beyond the usual rhetoric of flood defense and to move into a new era of rebuilding natural resilience to extreme climate events, using the gifts that nature herself has given us. Northwest England has been struck by truly apocalyptic flood after Storm Desmond hit this weekend, and this article was written on December the 7th, so that's like a week or so ago, last weekend, with some 5,000 people flooded out of their homes in Carlisle, another 9,000 premises still at risk of flooding, and damage likely to be in the hundreds of millions of pounds. It has become a political hot potato. The 38 billion pounds of flood defenses recently installed by the Environment Agency failed to stop the floods, causing acute embarrassment for Prime Minister David Cameron, who is visiting the area today, which was December the 7th. So what's it all about, and why weren't the flood defenses up to the job? Actually, it's surprisingly simple. A lot of rain fell, more rain than has ever fallen anywhere in the UK before in a 24-hour period. According to the Met Office, MET, 341.4 millimeters of rain, about 14 inches, was measured over 24 hours in the Lake District of Honaker Pass in Cumbria, beating the previous UK record set at Seathwaite, Cumbria of 316.4 millimeters on November the 19th of 2009. And with global warming, we can expect much more extreme weather incidents, and more serious ones too. The only thing is, we don't know where they will hit or when. Last winter was fairly dry. The winter before, it was the southwest of England that copped it. But what we're learning is that traditional flood defenses, which aim to constrain floodwaters into river channels, are only ever part of the solution at best, because by the time the surge of water is in the river channel, it's already too late. The government has committed to £2.3 billion worth of flood defense over 6 years. But if that's all it does, it will be, and excuse the pun, money down the drain. The real action is in the headwaters. How come? Because current flood protection has practiced by the Environment Agency is all about moving water downstream as fast as possible. In the case of Carlisle, which is near the sea, that's not altogether daft, but it's definitely not enough. We also have to look to where the water is coming from. Carlisle is a lowland city where 3 huge upland areas standing right behind it. The Lake District National Park, the Northumberland National Park, the North Pennines, AONB, with rivers that drain them, covering the city and its surrounding floodplain. Dump a foot of water onto all these hills, and what's it going to do? In the state they're in, it's going to run off fast. That's because those uplands have been largely denuded of tree cover and subject to deliberate drainage schemes on a high moors intended to make them more productive for sheep rearing. Moorland drainage is, thank heavens, no longer official government policy, but the drainage ditches and trenches are still there. In many cases, they have been eroded into huge gullies, cutting 5 meters or more deep into the landscape down steep-sided hills. Other low-lying hillside lands have likewise been drained for agriculture, if not by government officials and agencies, but by farmers trying to squeeze more production out of their fields. The result is that as you move down into the river channels, they are severely eroded, their banks usually treeless from overgrazing and ready to turn into surging torrents the moment a storm hits. So the answer is, again, not rocket science. The storm waters must be held back into the moors, bogs, fields, and headwaters so they don't just make a headlong dash for Carlisle and the sea, but are given the chance to replenish soils and aquifers and are released only slowly into the main streams and rivers. I'm just going to pause there and comment. I mean, if anybody wants to call in, it's a U.S. number at 917-947-9036 to talk about this subject. Just for, till 6:30, and then Deborah Sweet from The World Can't Wait agreed to fill in for Oliver Tickell. But it's going to be on a different subject than the climate. But I just wanted to pause here to emphasize the complete, blind spot that, people are in, these corporations or this environmental agency that he's talking about in his article, in that, it's like so simple that naturally nature is going to be the answer, but people have tunnel vision and they're so used to just being unconscious and doing everything this unconscious kind of for-profit way that clearly doesn't even work. And when things clearly don't even work, they just still continue to do what doesn't work. It doesn't occur to anyone that, nature is the answer, and just, it's kind of, I don't know, like, I find it completely mind-boggling that something so simple to just solve problems naturally is going to be nature. And yet that's like the furthest solution from the minds of people that I just feel that people who run these agencies are just so used to having profit motives that they don't really know, and they're not used to doing things that actually are going to work. They don't even know how to turn to solutions that are actually going to work. So the next section again, it sounds almost ridiculous to have to read it, but it says we need more trees. It's no secret that just having trees in the landscape helps rainwater to infiltrate into soils. The rationale for this and the evidence to back it up was presented in an article on The Ecologist by Mike Townsend, then principal advisor to the Woodland Trust, in March 2014. In it, he showed that hedgerows and shelter belts reduce surface water runoff from fields, which carry with it nutrients and soil. Planting tree belts across upland sheep pasture led to a 60-fold increase in water infiltration compared to other locations without tree belts, due to the improved soil structure and the effects of tree roots. When this effect was modeled across the catchment, the result was a potential reduction in peak stream flows of as much as 40%. This is clear evidence that integrating trees into our upland farms will play a part in reducing flood risk downstream, he wrote. Trees also bring benefits in lowland floodplains. According to the Forest Research, woodland strategically located on floodplains can mitigate large flood events by absorbing and delaying the release of flood flows. Research based on the River Carey in southwest England suggested that 2.2-kilometer reach of floodplain woodland could increase flood storage by as much as 71%, delaying the flood peak progressing downstream. This suggests there are opportunities for creating strategically placed floodplain woodland to alleviate downstream flooding, he wrote, particularly the increased risk associated with climate change. Townsend also wrote of Cumbria and its 112,000 ha of common land, much of which is overgrazed and deforested. Working with landowners and grazers, the Woodland Trust has been planting 65,000 trees and shrubs on a 110 ha, which is 270 acres of T-Bay Common. That's good work, but the area is small compared to the size of the problem, which extends across much of the UK and its uplands in particular. A major national tree planting effort is called for to build our national resilience to future flood events. Okay, it is 6:30. Let me just see if Deborah Sweet is available yet. Okay, so let me read. I'm going to continue then, into the next. Talks about beavers are native landscape engineers. I mean, again, I just have to pause and just try to stress nature is the answer. I mean, how complicated can that be? The fact that it's so difficult, and not just in this situation with the environment and flooding and climate change, but in any situation, in war, in conflict, in arrest and police brutality, just trying to nature is always going to be the cure. When people are sick, cancer, whatever physical ailments or emotional ailments people have, nature is always going to be the cure. And we're always going to keep running into the same problem over and over and over again, is that nature and capitalism and the economy are at opposite ends. And so as long as people just keep doing everything for made out of thin air monetary reasons rather than reasons and solutions that actually work, nothing is ever going to change. So, I mean, no matter what the problem, climate, wars, police brutality, crime, whatever, we can just expect more of the same devastation. So trees are important for another reason too. They are food for beavers, and beavers use them to build their dams. And beavers will do all the work of damming up the streams and gullies for us free of charge. And that's absolutely key to restoring landscapes and making them water retentive. We should therefore select water-loving species that are palatable to beavers, like poplars, willows, sallows, and alders, and establish them along watercourses, ditches, streams, ponds, and eroded upland gullies. Northumberland National Park is currently trying to block its eroded gullies by hand to avoid causing further damage by machinery. And it's hard, expensive work. Helped by volunteer labor, the park is laying 146 core logs, or sausages, into gullies and eroded peatlands in order to hold waters back to improve downstream water quality. The team are confident that the new technique will make a real impact on the 1.5 kilometer of eroded gullies near Carter Fell on Whitley Moor. The park reports the aim of the work is to slow the flow of water and stop peat sediment from entering the River Reed. The reed is known for its freshwater pearl mussels, which need extremely clean water and gravel beds. It is hoped that their quar logs will last about 5 to 10 years before they naturally break down. This will allow time for the bare peat gully walls to become revegetated and slow the flow of water. They must be praised for their efforts, but there's no doubt that beavers would make an even better job of it, and at much lower cost, so long as we provide them with the trees they need to eat and build their dams with, and give them the freedom to reproduce and spread across the uplands and valleys to recreate truly living landscapes. The dams would not just reduce flood risk, they would also prevent the summer droughts to which the area is also prone as a result of the rapid water drainage, and restore healthy river flows throughout the year. Government must move beyond the old rhetoric of flood defense. The irony here is that, as noted in an article on The Ecologist this weekend, beavers are actually being shot in Scotland with the tacit approval of the Scottish government and its wildlife agency Scottish Natural Heritage, in a clear caving in to the country's powerful land-owning interests. So please, Scotland, if you have too many beavers, send them to South Cumbria. But the truth is that Scotland needs its beavers every bit as much as England does, and for exactly the same reasons. I would not wish to prevent that every flooding event can be prevented by planting trees and restoring beavers. There will still be a role for orthodox hard engineering in protecting vulnerable floodplain settlements, but that approach alone can never provide the protection we need, especially with the rising power and ferocity of the weather we must expect in a warming world. It's time for governments to move beyond the usual rhetoric of flood defense and to move into a new era of rebuilding natural resilience to extreme climate events using the gifts that nature herself has given us. And that is Oliver Tickell, who was supposed to come on at 6. and was not able to make it. And it's from his post on The Ecologist entitled "Carlisle Floods Bring Back the Trees and the Beavers."